Good morning, Nesson Nation. Welcome into Boston has entered the chat. That group chat that jumps off of your phone and on to the television. I had to say it because we all know what goes down in the group chat. That's where you share your most intimate thoughts. And we've got a lot going on because the Boston Celtics had their round 2 when it came to the draft. Then we've got the NHL draft going down. Los Angeles tonight. Will the Boston Bruins stick with that number 7 pick? Will they shop things around? Will they jump up? I don't know. I've heard to anticipate chaos. We have some other good things in the tank for you guys, but I get to hang out with 2 of my faves, Annabelle Hasselbeck and Ountae Campbell. Ountae Campbell coming in to shed some light.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's Friday morning, up late last night, up early this morning, but, you know, Celtics draft moves always have me excited.
Yep, and we're going to get into that and so much more, but we want to hear from you guys. You can talk with us at #NessonChat. You can even call in and leave us a quick voicemail, 617-790-0928. I promised you guys it was interactive. AB, how's your Friday treating you so far?
I'm good. Kind of like Ountae, I've been up late, early mornings, but it's all exciting, right? You got the NHL draft, we have the NBA draft going on, so all fun things in Boston.
All the big things. It's hard to sleep right now. Everyone thought that things were going to get a little bit quiet. That is the complete opposite, especially for Boston. So as I mentioned, we were all waiting to see what are the Boston Celtics going to do with this number 32 pick. Did you have it on the bingo card that they were trading this thing, going for a 46th pick, a 57th pick, but it may make sense in the realm of finances a little bit, as well as the development we can expect from these 2 guys?
Yeah, you know, we talked about it a lot on Hold My Banner. I always wanted them to trade out of this pick because
you did say that.
I wanted them to go up and get a guy that's on another team now, so I won't give him too much light. But, you know, once the Suns ended up trading into the 31st pick of this NBA draft and going and stealing the Celtics wanted pick and Rasheer Fleming, I knew they were going to trade out. They were basically sitting there saying, hey, who wants this pick? We didn't get our guy, and that's okay. So, you know, I'm excited that they got the 2 guys that they got. I would have liked Rasheer Fleming because he would have added that defensive big that we needed, the ability to shoot the 3 ball. He can do some nice things on both ends of the floor, but, I mean, at the end of the day, the Celtics got 2 really good ones.
All right. My biggest thing was making sure that they got that center guy. We talked about it a lot. That's where we thought they were going to probably jump at first. Not particularly the case, but second, not as bad. With the 46th pick, they grab Amari Williams out of Kentucky. Big dude. Rebounding upside.
Yeah.
Shooting might not be as sexy as everybody is hoping for, but what case can you make for him?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about the shooting. I don't think the shooting's going to come for a guy like him, and I don't think the Celtics should ever ask him to extend his game to be a shooter. You have to remember, they have Luke Cornett on the team the last couple of years, and he started out as a shooting big, and now he doesn't even look at a 3-pointer. So, and that's just fine. When you talk about this kid Williams, though, 7 foot, 262, automatically brings physicality to the defensive end. He played at Drexel before he played at Kentucky for 4 years. 3 of those years, he was Defensive Player of the Year in that conference, the CAA. This kid, immediately when you see him on the box score, or when you watch a game, you're gonna notice facilitating, playmaking. 7-foot kid out of England who can do those things. I think the offense is gonna take some time to come to fruition. He's a guy who shoots over his right shoulder, so he's a left-hand hook guy, which is kind of, you know, just expecting. It's one of those things where if you're guarding a guy like that, you're going to say, all right, I know he's going over his right shoulder every time. He's a little timid when it comes to finishing at the rim. He's a little bit below the rim, which is sad because he's a 7-footer.
I was going to say size.
You would expect that a guy that big would be, you know, dunking on everybody. But, man, he can put the ball on the floor in transition. He can start your offense like a point guard, and he can pass that ball.
He can, and that's what jumped out to me is just how deceptive of a passer he is, because you have to be really savvy to do that, and it takes practice, right? You find out what works, what doesn't work. You're like, oh, that was sick. I'm going to do that again.
Right.
So I love that about him, but I would love to ask you about the hat situation that we saw last night in the draft, because it was a little confusing, and for me, just my perspective on it is like you dream for that moment. Right. You're waiting, and now you have a hat on of a team that you're not even going to and being asked questions and doing an interview about a team that's not on the Jumbotron behind you. So what's going on with that?
You know, the NBA is always going to protect the brand. And at the end of the day, the brand is the biggest thing for them. Trades happen, and they get rescinded all the time. I mean, we had a trade during the NBA trade deadline that got rescinded, you know, for the Mark Williams situation. So, you know, if they aren't sure that a player is definitely going to be on the Boston Celtics, then they're going to wait till their lawyers and the team's lawyers figure out the situation and say, okay, yes, officially now this kid is a Boston Celtic. So both of these dudes are here now. It is official. They will be in Boston at some point. But, unfortunately, they had to take on the hats of the Orlando Magic last night.
The shuffling hats. Yeah. Before we get to Max Shulga and potentially more shuffling hats, you make a great case to say sometimes how the finessing of the draft can help a little bit financially. We know the Boston Celtics are a little far out from getting too much help, but they're trying to figure it out. What did you make of them trading down, as you said you were totally fine with, but how this can potentially help finesse the finance? Yeah,
when you have early second-round picks, guys who are taken in the 30s, they're basically an extension of a first-round pick. Most guys in that range end up getting on the team, getting a guaranteed contract like a first-round pick would do. When you trade back into those later parts of the draft, these guys are now looked at as, hey, could they be a two-way guy? Are they going to have a G League contract? I mean, last year's 50-something pick, for the Celtics, Anton Watson, already got waived by the Celtics. So, they aren't taking on that money necessarily. We'll see what happens with these guys.
Well, we've been trying to escape taxes in Boston for a long time, since Paul Revere, all right?
Yes.
So this is, but I think Celtics saved $250 million in 10 days, which is pretty impressive. Good job, Brad Stevens, on that. But I just love to know with Amari Williams.
Yes.
We know that the Celtics want to keep their core as much as they can.
Yes.
But if we don't have those big guys in the center, do you see him being able to come up?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about their team is they don't have a big on their roster who can pass the ball like this kid does or initiate offense like this kid does, especially with Jason Tatum being out this year. You're going to be looking for guys who can help facilitate, take some, passing responsibilities off of a Derek White, off of a Jaylen Brown, because they're not natural facilitators. When you bring in a natural facilitator like this, he will have an opportunity. I don't think we're going to get the chance to see him that much in Boston, honestly, this year, because he has some things that he needs to work on. Like I said, aggressiveness, finishing at the rim. But you're going to see him in Maine, and if you're watching and paying attention to him in Maine, you're going to be questioning, because there's going to be some games where he might drop triple-doubles out there, and people are going to say, hey, why isn't this kid
call him up
playing for the Celtics right now?
Yeah, well, pivoting to that 57th pick, Max Shulga, he's a fun name to say. The first thing that I saw when this pick was made was another dynamic wing to the Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
Could his timeline of being impactful with the Celtics be a bit shorter? And more importantly, what do you see out of him? Because the next thing that popped out was shooter. Yeah, so of course, he is the 57th pick, and whenever you come in at the 57th pick, you're probably thinking G League. You know what I mean? You're probably thinking G League. But a lot of the things that you said is true. Ooter. I don't even put the SH on it. It's just a ooter with him, because he gets it up quick. That's how much you got to take off some letters for how fast he gets his shot up. He's a Celtic guy. You know what I mean? And it's the DNA.
It's the DNA, and I know I hate to say that about a white kid, but at the end of the day, this dude comes in. He has high basketball IQ. He has defensive pedigree. He wants to guard. He struggles a little bit with the physicality. This is a kid that we're talking about that's 6'4", 206. So when he switches on to bigger wings, like if he were to switch onto the Jason Tatum in practice, he's going to struggle a little bit with that. But he is a guy who tracks as a secondary facilitator. He is a good passer. He can put the ball on the deck. A little bit worrisome with his left hand. He has to work on dribbling with his left hand. But these are things that you can work on. I think that he's going to spend some time in Maine once again. Okay. And all three of these draft picks, Hugo Gonzalez, Amari Williams, Max Shulga, they're going to do a lot of things on the back of my shirt. I know you guys are going to talk about some fashion later on in the show, and I can't show you guys the back of my shirt, but it says, sorry, I was hooping. It's something that's synonymous with athletes. I know Annabelle was sending a lot of sorry, I was working out texts, sitting next here to a two-time national champion.
Years ago. I'm retired now. It's been a minute.
It still counts. It still counts.
But you have to send those texts, because they're going to be working hard a lot, you know what I mean? And their moms, their girlfriends, their cousins, their aunties, their uncles, whatever, are going to be like, where are you at? And they're going to always say, I was in the gym. Sorry, I was hooping. Yeah, sorry, I was hooping.
You're also coming to the Boston Celtics, right?
Yes.
And I think that carries a lot of weight for any player. But I just am really curious to know, these are a lot of international players that we got. We went Spain, London, and Ukraine. Do you think that was intentional?
I do. I think it's exactly intentional. I think when you have your coach in Joe Mazzulla, who has built an identity of an offensive firepower that mimics a lot of what you see in Europe. These guys come in, and the European guys are taught basketball from the fundamental level. Like we said, we're talking about a 7-footer that puts the ball on the deck like a guard.
Towering.
Is that 3 or 4 of me?
You know, so, you know, a lot of people are looking at bigs and guards and everything like that are full, complete packages on the offensive and defensive end. These guys can always get better. That's what young prospects have to do. But at the end of the day, these guys will fit into Joe Mazzulla's system, and that's why I think they went international in this draft.
Yeah, and it's funny, too, because you did call it on Hold My Banner. You mentioned the fact that there's a bit of a blueprint over there, and the other thing that's been kind of pointed out a little bit more is that the ready time between college players and those other pieces that they kind of need to hone in and get niche on, that doesn't translate as quickly as it does for the European guys, but they have different tests. You're playing against bigger dudes, more mature guys. You're playing against men over there. And
when you talk about Hugo, he played against men for the last 2 years. He's been in that system for years and years, since he was 9 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you talk about these two dudes. Yeah, they came from an international system throughout prep school, but now in college, they're 4 or 5 year guys. They're 23 coming in. They're mature. They're ready. That's the same thing that you can say about all 3 of these draft picks. Mature, ready guys.
Mature, ready, high character. Is that annoying that one keeps popping around?
No.
It's important.
It's
very
important. Especially when you're talking about a Boston Celtics team that really likes each other and have a lot of high character guys. You're not hearing about these guys getting in trouble in the media. You barely even know who their wives and girlfriends are because they're very private and, you know, just well-kept men. So when you're adding young guys into that mix, you want to make sure that they keep that thing going.
Yeah, and it makes it for a tight-knit locker room, which we saw played a big role in OKC as well as the Pacers. But as promised, you can get into all of the hoops talk with Ountae Campbell on Hold My Banner here on NESN and find out more of what takes place for the Boston Celtics draft and what trades can take place. We know that we're looking for a couple more waves.
Couple more moves.
One can safely say. But as I always promise, Boston is Under the Chat is interactive. We want to hear from you. Hashtag NESN Chat or call in at 617-790-0928. Boston's Under the Chat goes down on NESN, 8 to 9 a.m. here on NESN Nation, 9 to 10 a.m. We get into more of the conversation, all the things like I promised from your group chat here to Boston is Enter the Chat. Join us on the other side of this quick break back in the Salem 5 studio quickly. Welcome back into Boston has entered the chat. Kasey Hudson alongside Annabelle Hasselbeck. You usually see us on Respect Your Game running wild here on Boston's Under the Chat on NESN Nation live from the Salem 5 studios. Make sure you guys call in and chat with us or shoot us a little message over on hashtag NESN Chat because we want to hear your thoughts. We mentioned the fact that we have the NHL draft going down tonight back in Los Angeles, and there has been some teasing as to what can happen. There has been anticipation of surprise, even fireworks, a number of reporters would say, but at the end of the day, we're seeing dreams come true tonight, and we're more importantly hoping that the Boston Bruins hold on to that number 7 spot. It seems so far that that is kind of staying in lockstep. They know what they have in this. They haven't had a pick this high since 2011, and with all of the new branding, with the new era, with Marco Sturm, I'm feeling pretty confident that we stick at number 7. What do you think, AB?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And it's not every day that you get a top 10 pick. I mean, you said 2011, you probably have to remind yourself, how do we go about this? Or like, what's the process? Because the Bruins haven't been in this position in a long time. But, you know, Don Sweeney said it would take a lot to move off of this number 7 pick. So I think we can expect a great player regardless.
Yeah, and that's a good point to say that if we haven't done this in so long, maybe it's going to be encourageable to see, like, when you start bringing in a breath of fresh air, starting from the head coach, the assistant coaches, and then guys who could potentially have a better fit and development timeline to be a part of the Boston Bruins, to be an impactful part of the Boston Bruins sooner rather than later. That's what makes it encouraging to see how we can go about the upcoming draft. I already teased the fact that it is in Los Angeles, that we're hearing that there's a bunch of splashes taking place, but what are some of the names that have kind of been kicked around when it comes to potentially wearing that new Boston Bruins sweater? You got Jake O'Brien, you got Porter Martone, you got Roger McQueen, you got James Higgins, you got Caleb Noyers, and you got Brady Martin. Now, of all the guys that I just mentioned, only one of them are a right wing. Everyone else is a center. And more importantly, we have heard a number of fans express the fact that we've got to lock in that center. I've kind of been sitting on the other side of the wave on this one, only because when you need a center that's going to help your team now, you need that dynamic two-way contributor off the bat. You can't really put all your chips on, a draft pick that's going to take probably about 2 years to come into the mix. But a name that jumped out to me, Brady Martin. Some fans really high on it, some fans kind of trepidatious in terms of his offensive upside and when that can start to translate for the Boston Bruins. But he's got another unique story. He will not be heading to Los Angeles to be a part of the draft.
Crazy. And he's helping out his family on the farm, I believe. Is that why? That was his reason?
Yes.
Well, I think the unique part about this is that you don't know what kind of cross training that might give you. You got to break some equipment. There's probably heavy things to carry. So I think for Brady, this could actually help him on a scouting and evaluation side.
That's what I love about you, AB. You always have that keen extra perspective. It could be great cross training. Like for a girl whose godparents had ranches growing up, and I say ranches because it went from Homestead, Miami.
Look at your fit right now, Kasey.
It just tells you where I'm from. From Homestead, Miami, out someplace in Georgia. It is taxing to work on a ranch or work on a farm, and that's what he said. He felt like his presence was much more needed with his family, still helping out. This is a big moment, but it has to be his big moment no matter what. His dream gets to come true, but he gets to share it with his family in a way that he knows best. Helping out on the farm. Now, another name that gained some traction, lost some traction, but a unique story nonetheless. James Higgins, one of our very own Boston College players. We love to see him rep BC. We were excited when we found out, well, some fans were excited about the Islanders snatching that #1 spot. Him being from Long Island, you had all these great storylines just kind of intertwined. Then the draft stock started to drop a little bit. Some people even think dropping perfectly to that #7 spot for the Boston Bruins. What do you think about James?
Hey, whoever those some people are, that would be amazing. Like if we can get him at our 7th spot, we have to take him. And obviously, Boston College is the best place, heaven on earth, as I would say.
Non-biased,
but it's also a great place to develop. And if people are, kind of coming at him a little bit for dropping, what an awesome place. You have Greg Brown, who's bringing the best talent in the country. You have a team that always gets to the postseason. This is and competes, right?
Yeah.
And when you're surrounded by high-level athletes and high-caliber players, it makes you better.
Right.
So you're not playing down to your competition, and you're in the Hockey East. So I think Boston College is a great situation for him on that developmental side.
Yeah, and that's a really great thing to point out also, because I know some fans were kind of weary about what that development would look like. But here's the thing. Boston College has obviously sent a number of guys to the next step, the NHL, which is the dream. But now he's going to probably have a bit of a more elaborate role on this Boston College team that's going to have to re-identify themselves a little bit. They lost a chunk of talent, but Hagen's still one of those talents that can step up, and we can really see how keen his development becomes with that bigger role. So not straying too far from that. A guy that I was super high on, though, Porter Martone. And I got a couple of messages, nice ones, thankfully, that were like, I don't know if he's going to drop down to us, Case, but Elite Prospects did tweet out yesterday the fact that he has been in close conversations up to the umpteenth minute with the Flyers as well as the Bruins, which just gives you an inkling of hope. I think a number of teams are really going to look at this draft and think fit over name, because young guys are getting bigger roles placed on their shoulders earlier in their career. I mean, we saw north of 120 some odd in NHL debuts, injuries considered, in 2025 alone. That's not even the full NHL season. So taking that into consideration, and then the hype around a Bedard and a Celebrini and these guys who, once they made their debut, they were pretty lethal on their rosters out the gate. You want someone whose development time is going to be shorter rather than longer. You got a Marco Sturm who's over here ready to wield the best out of his players, and we actually got some thoughts from a former player of his and teammate of his that we'll shoot to in a minute. But Porter Martone just has a lot to offer. He's already got such good size on him. 6'3", 205 pounds. One of the few guys on this list that is already north of 200 pounds. So we don't have to talk about too much muscle or anything else getting into the mix. And I just love the fact that he has the capability of slowing down the game. He's not taking too many touches on the puck. And with a fast-paced game that tends to get away from people, Bruins were known for a number of turnovers. I feel like when it is his time, he can be a good plug-and-play into the mix of everything.
Definitely. He was turning heads for his performance with Team Canada in the World Championships.
Yes,
and there aren't a lot of guys. You can't say about a lot of guys that, oh, this dude drops bodies, okay? He's been said to be the third Tkachuk brother, which all I'm thinking is I want to be on your team, not against you, okay?
And
I don't
we want
to
the
be
Tkachuk early in his life,
yes,
not after the fact.
100%. So I think this dude just kind of embodies what that Boston Bruins player is. And yeah, we'll see where he ends up.
Yeah, other player comps have been Corey Perry. Back in Tampa Bay, we called him Scory Perry, and we've seen him be a pest. We've seen him be physical. Seen him be a scorer, a number of things. So there's just so many illuminations that can make you think Porter Martone could be a really stellar name in the mix. I mean, hands down, I think the one I've seen the most is Roger McQueen. Bring him in, bring him in, bring him in. But I'm going to stand by my thought. Now, the mock drafts, getting up to this final day where things are finally about to go down tonight, is pointed all signs to Jake O'Brien. I love some of the footage that I've seen of Jake O'Brien. My biggest question mark is that timeline. I know I keep repeating myself on it, but when you're in this retool, it really is important to think, how long is it going to take for this guy to actually be a full Boston Bruin? And he's 172 pounds, really good at creating offense, as a lot of the scouts and reports have noted, but you're talking about somebody who's going to need to put on more size in order to compete in the NHL. And we've seen so much controversy around like the pick of Dean, you know, he's a really tall kid, needs to add size, strength, mass, all these things. So you kind of want to bring in a player that you don't have to do too much dusting off on.
Right, and this is a hard job. You have to scout players for years. You're looking at everything. And so I think for him, like, yes, when will he be ready? You have to physically develop. But I think the great thing is you're going to bet on something that you know is going to happen, rather than those intangible qualities like leadership, character, and your skill level, right? And also just on the sides, like we've seen what the Sharks have done with Mac and Will. Max Shulga and Will Smith. And so hockey is changing. You don't have to be automatically a massive guy like we've seen. So I don't know. I think we could see Jake O'Brien sooner than later.
Oh, I love the positivity on that. But you are totally right. I mean, if his skill set makes him faster, it does all these other things that can help him compete without having the size and strength on him. Who knows how that'll go, but we'll figure it all out. A lot of questions to be answered tonight. Also, we will have a draft show giving you all of the nitty-gritty details of the NHL draft. But let's hear from a former Bruins draft pick, his thoughts on how that day went and all the emotions that went with it, from Nate Thompson.
I was a lot later in the draft than number 7, but yeah, no, I remember I was in Alaska at the time. It was like a Saturday morning. It was like 7 a.m. And obviously with the time change, the draft was in Nashville in 2003. And I get a call from Scott Bradley, who was the head of amateur scouting for the Bruins at the time. And he just called me. I think I missed his call, actually, his first call. And so I had to call him back, and he's like, yeah, we drafted you to the Boston Bruins. And I'm like half asleep. So it was an interesting phone call. It was the second day of the draft, and but at the same time, I mean, to be drafted by the Bruins, the original 6, where I started my career, was pretty special. So something I'll never forget, that's for sure.
Never forget, definitely very special. And I mean, what's better than starting your career with an original 6 team? Hopefully all the prospects have their phones on loud tonight. I'd hate to miss that call, but it doesn't mean that the dream hasn't come true and you don't get to move forward. But what happens after the draft is that we start to get a clearer picture of what needs to happen next. We get to weather down and mold this roster, which brings us perfectly to the free agency frenzy that'll go down Tuesday, July 1st. A name that was circulating heavily, tied to Boston just a little bit, was Mitch Marner, but I think we can put all that to rest because Nate Thompson actually kind of gave his opinion on where he thinks Mitch Marner is going.
Yeah, I would be shocked if Mitch Marner ends up in Boston. I don't foresee him ending up in the Atlantic Division. I see, like you said, I think Mitch Marner will end up out west. That's what, in my gut, I feel like he might end up here where I'm at with the LA Kings. That's just my prediction. But I think with Mitch Marner, I think it was just, I don't think it had anything to do with who he is and what's going on. But I think Mitch, it was just a time where sometimes you just need a change. You need to change the scenery. It ran its course there, and I think that Mitch, he's from there, he's grew up there, he played in London. We have to realize that he's never left that area of Ontario, and he's only played there, and he's grew up rooting for the Leafs, and now he's on the Leafs, and obviously you're in the hockey hotbed there in the mecca of media, so you're not gonna be cut any slack there. So I think for Mitch, this is going to be a good change of scenery, and who knows. All this talk about, him not playing in the playoffs and him not performing, if he goes to a new team, maybe another good team, maybe he will get that chance, and it'll be completely different in a different city other than Toronto. So we'll see what happens.
All All right, so Mitch Marner may not be a B, but a lot of fans didn't think it was particularly going to be a fit. We see a handful of guys that are potentially looking for a change of scenery, and we've seen it be a jump in a number of guys' career as well, kind of getting that breath of fresh air. A name that jumps off to me is going to be Brock Besser. Some people weren't in on it. Some people feel like his, let's just say, game is a bit inconsistent. When you've got drama going on in the locker room, when you've got so much movement in the front office and the coaching staff, and you have different requirements being asked of you, sometimes it's really hard to cement yourself into your game.
Definitely, and I think with even just going back to Mitch, that's the type of player we want to get, right? Someone who can generate that much offense. And even with Boser, he's from Minnesota. So I think there's the tough thing with the free agency is that there's a lot of teams that are in competition for a lot of these guys. So I know the Wild are looking at him, and that's a guy who could help the Bruins offensively. But yeah, it's going to be tough with all the competition. Yeah,
this is when you want to have the best negotiators on your side. And obviously Cap is going to make an impact on that one. Cap space getting ready to go up that 5%. What Besser could bring to the table is a guy who can score. Yes, the 50 points through 75 games isn't the flashiest, but it's his previous season beforehand. He was a big pillar and anchor in the postseason for a Canucks team that just keeps trying to figure it out. More importantly, you can always find him in the low slot trying to get things done here. But any names that jump off at UAB, or you're just hoping for the best?
This could be awesome, getting a veteran like Boser, because you played 9 years in the NHL. Think about the leadership that brings, that experience, and you're talking about maybe having to bring up some younger guys for the Bruins and the excitement that is. But also, you want to know like what you're going to get and have someone reliable to play with your core and to make the playoffs, right? Like if we're going to be real about it, like we're going to try to compete this year. Last year was a down year, so I think Boser could be a great fit here.
Yeah, well, a lot of questions to be answered here very shortly, and I can't wait to see what the case may be and what the identity of this team is going to start looking like. We talk identity, communication, relationship, but a lot of that is going to come down to that number 7 draft pick and the free agency frenzy. But talking about draft, talking about Bruins, talking about Celtics, we're going to kind of pull this all together in a hub of fashion. We have got one of the best designers who have made your favorite WAG jackets, your favorite athletes jackets, the customization, the breakdown, and so much more here on Boston Has Ended the Chat on Nessun Nation. Don't go anywhere. Join us on the other side of this break here live from Salem Studio. We'll catch you guys on the other side. Welcome back into Boston Has Entered the Chat live from the Salem 5 studio, and you're seeing us standing for a reason. Very special guest joining us here, Ben Weiner. You probably have seen his killer gear on, I don't know, the best wags around the NHL, the NBA, as well as the MLB, every sport that you can think of. College and professional. I mean, you deserve all the rave. Thank you so much for joining us from Jeanius Jackets.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I have been DMing you about all your work for months. So the first thing I had to say is I'm glad we got it off the DMs and in live and in person. But I have to start by asking you, how did this even all come about?
You know, it really all started during the pandemic. I had so much free time after my job, as I'm sure we all did. Yeah. And I asked my mom for a sewing machine, and I said, you know, the one deal is you can't tell anybody about this. And, you know, the secret's definitely out now. I started doing, you know, jerseys for myself. Then I started making some jerseys for my dogs. And then it moved into stuff like mashups. I wanted a jersey that I could wear from Fenway Park to TD Garden, and I wouldn't have to stop at my car to change in between. You know, there was a cease and desist letter in between, and then I finally landed on jackets, the sweet spot, about a year later after getting the sewing machine. And 2 years after that, left my full-time job, and you know, now we're here today.
Woo, that is incredible. Well, Kasey was DMing me your Instagram profile, and so when I saw this, I was like, no, I literally screamed outside one of the studios. I was so excited to talk to you.
Goods.
But when you said that you asked your mom for a sewing machine, that doesn't just like, and then boom, you know how to use it. How did you just learn how to make these incredible jackets?
Some very friendly grandmother on YouTube taught me how to sew. I
did not think you were going to YouTube with that.
Yeah, I went to YouTube, and I probably watched the same video over and over again for hours until I finally figured it out. And it took a lot of time. You know, I think the first week I had it, I thought I was going to throw the machine away. And, you know, eventually eventually we got to here, but yeah, it took a long time in between, about 4.5 years.
I'm embarrassed to say I think I'd be the one throwing the machine away, and I have foreign parents that are like, my mom's got a needle and thread on her all the time. It's an instant fix, but such intricate detail on top of it. Before we start getting into the goods, you did play hockey. You had a big moment happen for you with some licensing stuff, but were you a creator when it came to the hockey jerseys over at Maryland? Because I had guy friends who played lacrosse growing up. They look at Maryland's lacrosse gear, they always stood out. There was color blocking, there was just so much flashiness to Maryland's look.
Yeah, I mean, Maryland definitely has a signature look with that, insane flag that they, all adore there. And yeah, actually, when I was a senior on the hockey team at Maryland, they asked us to redesign our jerseys, and that was kind of my first, steps into designing jerseys. Redesigned our jerseys, we sold them to the fans, and it took about 2 years later before I was actually designing something again. I went into working a job in marketing for some tech companies in Boston, and I finally found my way out and back into sports. But yeah, it really all started in Maryland, and now I'm fully licensed to sell gear for the Terps, so that's a very full circle moment.
Wow, and you have to have an eye for that, right? Was there anything that you did growing up, or maybe little activities that you noticed that, hey, I might have an eye for design?
Yeah, I would just take jerseys and put them into Photoshop and would just start changing the colors on them. Oh, this should be different here, that should be different there. And, eventually it turned into doing it in real life.
Well, I already teased that a lot of the popularity is the fact that you have got to collaborate with some of the best wags. And of course, hockey being what it is here in Boston, we've got the NHL draft going down tonight. We've got the NBA draft already going about. Let's see some of your favorite work from both teams, starting with the Boston Bruins, because they unraveled, showed some new swag when it comes to their sweaters, but this is as swaggy as it can get. What do you like with the Bruins?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a piece that I did for the Centennial game. This one is not for sale, but I did this one for myself. And yeah, obviously this is the new rebrand with that classic logo on it. I'm glad they went back to it. And it's got the new word mark on the back, and I think there'll be a nice bear patch appearing on that arm pretty soon. But yeah, hopefully you can have those available in TD Garden this coming season. But in terms
or after for Kasey and I, right after the show.
But yeah, I would say in terms of favorites, this one was obviously probably one of the most popular ones.
Blew up the internet.
Yeah, this was the WAG jacket from the Centennial season. This was the one that I designed with Katrina Marchand, and maybe Brad will come back, maybe he won't, but I'm glad they at least took me to Florida with that little adventure that they went on.
Oh, we will circle to that, but we got to stick with this bad boy for just a second, because I want to know how the collaboration came about. The WAG Jackets took another step this past season in terms of like the TikToks, the wives and the girlfriends getting on board by showing all the details. Look, I saw so many sick jackets, but this was the jump off for me. How'd this collaboration come about?
Yeah, this really all started, last February. It was right after Brad had played his 1,000th game. I did jackets for him and the whole family. And then Katrina said, we got to do something really special for the Centennial season. I want a jacket that looks like it was pulled out of your grandfather's closet and still reeks of cigarettes. This is what we landed on, and I think it's perfect. It looks like it has cigarette burns literally on it. And, we went with that super retro look. Normally, I'm using tackle twill, which is what you see on, like, the numbers and jerseys on uniforms, but this is felt. So it's very classic looking, which is what they wore, on their third jersey. So you can feel it, it's very soft. And yeah, so it's very retro looking, and, this really took on a life of its own. This was, I think, the only leather jacket in the playoffs last year, and I feel like we may have seen...
I think I saw a lot of copycats.
I saw a lot of leather
that.
Jackets this season, yeah.
Big time. It's funny that you went there, because the other thing that I was going to say is that we saw them kind of try to take from this look and create more of like that Top Gun with the leather in a number of ways, and then add their own felt to different pieces of it. Winnipeg Jets, I'm calling you out. But I loved that jacket tremendously. And then, of course, hopefully it brings us some good luck when it comes to the Bruins draft tonight. What did you make of the new sweaters? And is there a particular bear that you have in mind? Because one of our other hosts here, George, he mentioned that he liked the meth bear more. He wasn't sure which one to go with. You mentioned a bear sneaking up on that jacket.
Well, I think just with the rebrand, I'm probably going to have to go with that 3-leg bear that they have that's on the shoulder. I do like that. I do wish it was on the other shoulder as well.
Okay.
But other than that, I think the rebrand was perfect. I think everybody was hoping for that 80s, 90s look, and we finally got it back, and hopefully hopefully it brings a new tide to the team.
A new tide. I love that. AB.
Yeah, well, I'd love to know one more thing about this specific jacket, because people see this all over Instagram. It goes viral and it looks beautiful even now, and it's probably been everywhere. But there's a lot of hard work that goes into this. What was the most challenging part of making this specific jacket?
It was probably learning how to sew on leather. This was the first leather jacket I'd ever sewn on, and when Katrina said, you know, it's going to be a leather jacket, the first thing I did was I went out and bought a brand new sewing machine, because I knew what I had was not going to get it done. So I bought a new one and took some time to learn on it. But yeah, I would say the heavier the material, you know, the harder it is, and this is a thick jacket. So sewing on leather and sewing with felt, this thing was tough in general. I'm glad I don't have to do these again.
Not yet, because I'm sure people are going to be asking about it. The leather look really took off. Another draft taking place, as I mentioned, the Celtics, they get rid of their 32nd pick yesterday. They pick up 2 other ones, 2 new guys on the team. Let's see some of your favorite work from the Celtics collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did 4 drops with the Celtics this year. This one is similar to the first drop, except it has a little bit of a different back on it. So we did a Banner Night drop, and this was essentially the jacket that we dropped on Banner Night. That were 6 available. They actually sold out in 30 minutes before the game even started. They opened the doors at 6 o'clock.
I mean, I see why. This thing is shining. It's radiating.
So this thing's shining. So I did one that was a little more evergreen with this logo on the back, but the Banner Night one had a huge banner on it, and yeah, they sold out like crazy, which was incredible to see. And this was the jacket that we then dropped on Christmas Day, if I can get it off the rack. Yeah, so this was the Christmas Day drop that we did. A little bit more of a retro feel with the forest green. And then there was a third drop that we did on St. Patrick's Day, and a leather drop that we did during the playoffs.
See, I told you leather's going to be sticking around. Okay, could be a silly question, but I must know. Sometimes you have the ability to have the stencils to create the logos and do all these things, or you have to freehand it and then somehow kind of create the stencils or the structure work to have the sewing go down. What's path, or do you do both?
Yeah, so for these, it's, you know, everything's cut on a Cricut. So the way that these start off, these are just giant sheets of like twill material. So I'll have white, and then I'll have this beige color, and it'll just be a huge sheet. And then I'll have the design in my computer, and a little needle or a little, you know, razor will cut the design out. And then I've got to, you know, perfectly place them on top of each other. And then from there, you know, I'm just hand stitching it sitting in front of a sewing machine. So no real stencils or anything. It's just a labor of love more than anything.
And how long does that take for one jacket?
Well, you know, I would say Lucky's face here probably took like 45 minutes. You know, the back probably took like an hour and a half. But, you know, I would say this piece alone, this is like a 3.5, 4 hour design, just the back. So it really depends on the design and the details that go into it. When you got tiny little clovers all over his jacket, that's going to take a lot of work to do.
So then when you get a collaboration that comes in, hey, we need some Jeanius gear, do you have a typical window that you're like, this is how long it would take to like customize anything?
You know, not really. I've done some jackets that have been 23-hour turnarounds. I had an NFL wife who was playing a game. Her husband was playing a game in Philly, and she called me on a Tuesday and said, I'd love to have this jacket at my hotel by Saturday. And I had the jacket done 23 hours later. Now, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. You know, I've had some jackets that have taken up to 6 months just because of all like the planning that goes involved with it. But yeah, you know, I would say somewhere in between, somewhere in that like 4 to 5 week spot is kind of the sweet spot.
And when you do have that 6 months and you have time to plan, what goes into maybe your design process and your inspiration for these jackets?
You know, for something where we're really planning, you know, 6 months into it, it's got to be like a really special piece, whether it's, you know, you're retiring or they want like a career collaboration piece. You know, I did one for Tim Ream, you know, the U.S.
Love him.
Yeah, so U.S. soccer player, and worked with his wife on that. We really wanted to work in all the teams and his entire career along the way. So that design had to be really well thought out, tell the story for, you know, St. Louis to England, you know, back to here in the U.S. national team, all in between. So some pieces take a lot of time, and you really want to make sure that it's perfect. You know, it's a piece that it's not just, you know, for now, it's something to pass on to their grandkids as well, so they can remember, you know, the special career they had.
Yeah, just a little bit of pressure on kind of honoring all the moments and monumental pieces that go into a jacket, which brings us perfectly to the fact that you have this journeyman jacket that I think is just so tremendous. You've made it for a couple of guys. You mentioned retirement. Pat Maroon got one, but I want to talk about Charlie McAvoy's, because his was was amazing. We saw Boston University on the sleeve. We saw, obviously, the Bruins honored just so much into it. And of course, he's not retiring, but you still had to kind of make a magnitude of this jacket, this moment for Four Nations.
Yeah, that was a really special jacket when Kyler reached out to me. That was another one that just took so much planning involved in getting it right. And yeah, we really wanted to make a nice big space for Boston University, and we had the jersey that he wore at Fenway Park during Frozen Fenway. We had the Frozen Fenway patch on it, and then we also had the Winter Classic patch, where it was the other game that he had played at Fenway Park. So we really just tied in all of the special moments through Charlie's career so far, and hopefully, we'll get some Stanley Cup patches on the next one we make.
I love it. And just looking at the collection that you have, it's a lot of bomber jackets, and those seem to never go out of style. But is there a design or a type of jacket that you like using the most?
Yeah, I like the silk satin jackets the most. I just think they're light. You can wear them the most time around the year, and you can just really go all out with the design. This one is, based on the 1996 All-Star game that TD Garden hosted, back when it was called the Fleet Center, where it just opened. And this design, was really just based on the ticket stub that they gave out. And, I came up with this last September, and this was probably the longest, hours in terms of stitching. And yeah, I just think the silk satin jackets, they're a nice evolution from the starter jackets that we saw in like the 80s and 90s that were super popular.
True.
But those were made out of polyester, and this silk material, I think, is just like a nice evolution from that. And yeah, I love these, and I think that these will be popular forever.
Probably gives you a lot of creative space, a perfect canvas, one would say. But we've seen all the great stuff not only on your social media and what you thankfully brought in today, but what projects or collaborations do you have coming up that you can maybe tell us a little bit about, or that you're most excited about?
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited about a project that I'll be starting later today. There's a concert that will be at Fenway Park in July, and the artist will be wearing my jacket on stage during the show.
This is sick.
Which is very exciting. I've done a lot of artist gifts with venues around the country, including the Garden, Amica Mutual Pavilion in Providence, down in DC at Capital One Arena. But those have just been gifts where they're just giving it before the event starts. This one they'll actually be wearing, which I am super, super excited about. So those will be some crazy pictures of them on stage at Fenway.
Oh my gosh. Do you have a favorite team that you like creating stuff for, or musician, if you're allowed to say it?
I mean, the Bruins. It's got to be the Bruins. The Bruins are my favorite team. They've always been my favorite team, and would love to get some stuff at TD Garden as well. Doing stuff for the wives is cool, and getting to do the Celtics jackets is incredible for TD Garden as well. But yeah, I would say anytime I can do some stuff for my hometown teams, that's a dream come true.
We're going to put you on the spot a little bit. Some hopes, some encouragement. What do you think the Bruins season will hold for us coming up here? Because hope starts tonight in the NHL draft.
Yeah, I'd like to just see them get this back on track and kind of, get the team going in the direction that it needs to. I don't think the playoffs are likely next year, and I don't think that's bad anyway. I think you got to be moving in the right direction and build for the next couple of years. Let's get this team, ready to win a cup in 3 to 4 years.
Well, they can look good regardless.
Exactly.
In your jackets.
They can be locked in on the look, but hey, trusting the process, you probably know that better than anyone with this art that you create so magically. Make sure you guys check out Jeanius Jackets over on Instagram, all social media, and then, I don't know, hit up Ben so that you can get some sick gear as well. You guys know the deal. You can see Boston's End of the Chat every Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. here on NESN, 9 to 10 on NESN Nation, where we continue to have great guests, break down all things for your favorite Boston sports. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you join us on the other side of this quick break. Ben, thank you once again for coming in and joining us here on Boston's End of the Chat.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back into Boston Has Entered the Chat live from the Salem 5 studio. Kasey Hudson and Annabelle Hasselbeck. We have had a rally of a Friday show. We got into the Celtics draft, them trading away that 32nd pick. We got into some NHL draft conversation. You saw some of the best gear that you can get from Jeanius Jackets. And then it's time for us to get into trending, because we always promise whatever's going down in your group chat, we talk about here on Boston Has Entered the Chat. And you can call in with your thoughts as well at 617-790-0928. Now, trending is going to take us back to the NHL, AB, and it's because we could be seeing a lot of changes. Not just the draft, not guys getting their dream come true. No, we're talking about a number of things. We're talking about them potentially extending the regular season to 84 games, full-time emergency backup goalies, no player dress code This one we definitely got to get into. Max 6-year deals for FAs, 7 years for re-signings, and then player salary cap mechanisms closes LTIR loophole. I know a number of fans as well as teams, players, front office guys are going to be very excited about this. Well, not the teams that use that LTI finessing, but what do we kind of make of all of the changes? There's so much going on in the NHL at once.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on. And just to start with the no dress code, I mean, we just brought out some amazing styles of jackets that we could see in that lineup. And I think, sometimes it's actually easier to have a dress code because then you don't have to, have all the decisions about what to wear, So I also saw some fans saying, we don't want players to dress sloppy or any of that. And I really don't think that'll be a thing. I think for the length, people, you want to look good, play good, feel good, right? And
exactly.
So I'm excited about that.
I'm excited about that one too because you're right. You don't want it to get sloppy. There is something that's just always been so hockey about the suits. You've heard these guys talk about their tailor and, how they go and find their suits when they travel to different cities. That's where they do like the most shopping and get the intricate, nice, high fashion stuff that they're going to walk into games on. So you would miss that. It would be interesting to see what guys kind of still try to maintain that. But we want to see more personality in hockey. I think that gives us an opportunity to do just that.
In 84 games to do that. That's a lot of games, and to come up with the right style for each one, I mean, that's a hard job.
Oh, it's stressful enough to figure out what to wear day to day. I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of 84 games. It does pull back some of the preseason games, which we've had so many conversations on throughout the NHL. But look, it's one of the most taxing sports in the world, kind of having those extra games and seeing when and how the season wraps up and what it pushes for postseason will be interesting. None of these decisions are solidified quite yet. There will be a press conference at 1 p.m. Eastern time where we'll figure out which of these fully get the check off to be moving forward into the upcoming seasons. Now, quickly pivoting to something else that's trending. We talk about new movement, we talk about money, but nobody knows money like Cristiano Ronaldo getting an extension. Catch this, for 178 million pounds. Also, goal bonuses, private jets, and 15% ownership of the team. Just to put into perspective, everyone, the conversion on this 178 million pounds is $243,860,000 per year.
It's wild. Well, I just have to point out this photo. I mean, it looks AI. I mean, that cannot be a real background, right, Kasey?
No, there's no way. But why? Why give us the fake background of the palm trees and the beach to make? We know the deal is sweet. You don't have to try to sweeten it by this.
Well, they're using all their money in this deal and probably not in the graphics and in the photo shoot that they had, is what I'm guessing.
I didn't even think about that. He'd be the budget announcements is what comes of this. We know that this is a guy who obviously made money more of the mission on the back end of his career. Cristiano Ronaldo is still one of the most dynamic feet in soccer. I mean, I used to have his Portugal posters all over my wall. Did I think I'd see the day that he would be playing for, teams outside of the original European teams? Not so much, but when you look at the fact that you can get 15% ownership of a team, we're seeing new incentives being placed into contracts, and a part of me is is this a good thing, or is this something that's going to start tainting the negotiations moving forward? It's going to be more than just your dream coming true and you being able to make a living for your family. It's turning into a bit much.
Yeah, it's interesting, but you mentioned his age. He's old, but he's still kicking it. Literally,
yeah,
he scored
totally
99 goals, I think, and is 111 a game. So he's doing really well. So yes, you can say he definitely deserves this. But just looking at what is in his contract, he's got 3 drivers, 4 housekeepers, 2 chefs, 3 gardeners, 4 security people. Out of that list, if you had to pick, okay, if I got to hire one job to employ, what would you choose? Would you want the chef, the driver, the security guard?
Ooh, maybe the driver. I know most people would probably go chef, but I love cooking. That's my peace, that's my calm moment, that's my time to myself. I wouldn't mind some help every once in a while, especially after these long weeks that we tend to have in our industry. But, and to think, you would think that he has a family of 15 with that kind of staff running around, but what would you choose?
I don't know. I think I'm gonna go with the chef, just because I feel like that would expand my palate, probably, than the 5 things that I make for myself every day.
The 5 things you make. Avi, you've got plenty of time to figure out what that menu looks like. You know who's running out of time, though? The Boston Red Sox. They're looking to rally against the Blue Jays coming up in the series ahead. And there's a number of question marks swirling around this series, not just us as fans, as well as media wanting to see better and consistent performances out of the Red Sox. But that trade deadline is now kind of getting more insight. It's becoming clear. And with that being said, with the performances that we've seen as of late, could we see the Red Sox be more aggressive during this trade deadline? Because we heard that they're not waving the white flag. But in order to say I'm not waving the white flag and then kind of be coming up short at that 500 mark, you might have to either wave it or become aggressive at the trade deadline.
Yeah, this is definitely a hot time, right? And it's definitely not coming at a great time of coming off a losing streak. But I do think there's something that's a gift and kind of organic that this is the halfway mark when you're coming back home after having a tough performance out west. I think there's something special about being able to turn their page more naturally here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the page turner is going to come from a number of sources. It's going to be leaders stepping up on this team. I know some people have given him slack, but Trevor Story, you do have to give credit to the turnaround in his game. And then we have to see what's going to make of the young guys. You know, inconsistency, I think, is a commonality when you're getting your first call up to the big leagues, trying to find your identity, trying to find how you're going to be an impact on this team. And we've seen some really good progressions for each of the young guys. We know that Christian Campbell ended up getting sent back down, but regardless, Roman Anthony catching a lot of heat. Don't you think that he has managed the bigger lights a bit better these days?
Definitely. And I think for all of these younger players, like, that's a really hard position to be in, right? But I think the tone in the discussions that we've had just about the Red Sox over the last couple weeks, if we didn't have this youth movement, it would be very different, regardless of how well they're playing, just to have that potential and to have that #1 prospect. And, oh, look at the talent that we have. And look at Marcelo has played at second base. Like, look at how he, stepped up to that and rose to the occasion there in the West. So I just think that, yes, this conversation would be very different if we didn't have those younger players.
Oh, it would be very different. Something that they do have in common, all of these young guys, is the buy-in. We've heard from each of them saying that they'll play wherever, they'll do whatever it takes. So the learning is there, the open-mindedness is there. But we always do a little bit of hot seat between Travis and I as to some expectation. Do we think that this team can get on the right track coming up here and kind of make more of a statement that they don't have to wave the white flag and they probably don't have to be as aggressive facing the Blue Jays? That can be something where we can see some negotiation opportunities between these two teams gearing towards the trade deadline.
Yeah, well, they have the most errors in the league, and I think they take that personally, right? Those are the fundamentals, and then you're coming back home, you're at the halfway point, the trade's coming up. So I just think that with all those pressures, they're going to have to step up. They saw the performance that Crochet had. You have to create offense, and you have to produce when guys on your team are going at bat for you like that.
Yeah, you got to support, and every guy has to come up strong a little bit better. We talked about the fact that it gets a little lopsided. You see guys kind of started breaking out of their ruts, and then other guys kind of falling into a rut of their own. We need to see everybody just be on the same page, rally behind it, carry that chip on their shoulder, because the wins have created such highs for Boston, for this Boston Red Sox team, and so much more. It is time for us to switch gears here on Boston Has Entered the Chat. But guess what? You can continue to hang out with us and the conversation over on NESN Nation. A nice reminder that you guys can always call in. Let us know your thoughts. 617-790-0928. Boston Has Entered the Chat here on NESN 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 9 to 10 a.m. over on NESN Nation. We'll catch you guys over on NESN Nation.